Are you able to guarantee, to assure these states, these hospitals, that everybody who needs a ventilator will get a ventilator?
I think that, number one, we've distributed, a ventilator is a big deal. We've distributed vast numbers of ventilators, and we're prepared to do vast numbers. I think we're in great shape.
Everybody who needs one will be able to get a ventilator.
Look, don't be a cutie pie, okay? You know, everyone who needs one.
Well, that exchange with the president, ABC News Chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl squaring off with the president last week. That's something that we see just about, frankly, every day during the White House news conferences. Trump going after the press corps, particularly if they ask a direct question. Now, the White House briefing room was gathering dust until this crisis, but now we see the president on a daily basis. I want to bring in Jonathan Karl now to discuss what's going on. He is also the author of a new book that comes out tomorrow, Front Row at the Trump Show. Probably not expecting a cutie pie, right?
Richard, you played that just now. Listening to it, I've now heard it, many times since it happened. I didn't believe it when it happened, and it doesn't really make much more sense when I hear it later. The weirdest part about that was not Donald Trump taunting me. He does that all the time. It wasn't that he said cutie pie, which is not a taunt he has used before, but it was that the question was that was Friday. That was the big question of the moment. New York had just said they needed 30 to 40,000 ventilators within the next 2 weeks. This has been a huge issue for several states asking for ventilators. So the question was kind of the central question. Can you assure us these governors and these hospitals they'll have the ventilators they need? I thought maybe he might answer, look, we're doing the best we can. We're working with GM. We're going to force these guys to produce more. We're going to help distribute them. We're going to do our best. There's no guarantees in life. But no, he took offense to the question and came up with that unusual taunt.
And he went after, in many of the cases, but Peter Alexander from NBC jumps to mind, where he asked, I thought, a completely not a legitimate question, but he spoke to the feelings of a nervous country. What do you say to people who are scared? And the president went after him.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Go ahead. I think it's a very nasty question, and I think it's a very bad signal that you're putting out to the American people. And you ought to get back to reporting instead of sensationalism. Let's see if it works. It might and it might not. I happen to feel good about it, but who knows? I've been right a lot.
There's times where you sit back, and I appreciate the difficulties where you don't get 3 follow-up questions, but sometimes, and you probably can appreciate, people sit at home and be like, wait a minute. He said 3 completely different things in the last 3 days. Why doesn't somebody hold his feet to the fire about the changing policies, the changing positions? But it's really hard to do, in part because no one ever thinks they're going to be called cutie pie on national TV here, and it kind of, it's silly, but it kind of speaks to it. And there's just, you don't know where it's going to go when these things start, do you?
No, you don't. And, you have to be prepared to do the follow-ups, and we do. And I have asked, the questions about the wildly shifting projections about, about what's happening here. Remember, it was on February 27th that President Trump said that there were 15 cases of coronavirus, which at that point there were 15 known cases in the United States, and he predicted we would soon be down to 0. Now, yesterday, he was saying that if we do everything right, we could still see 100,000 people die in the United States from this. Now, that's not his fault, and nobody would expect that he would come into office, especially with his background as an expert in pandemic diseases. But he has said things that have been all over the map, and it's our responsibility to ask him about that. I also think that kind of political repercussions of all this, and there will be many, are not the central story right now. People want to know what the federal government is doing. They want to know what they should be doing. They want to understand the nature of the problem, what's to come next, how long this is going to last. And those are the questions that I think are important to ask right now in the briefing room, which again is why I was surprised at his reaction to that one, because it was not about politics. It wasn't saying, oh, you said, 5 weeks ago X and now it's, I wasn't doing that with him. I was just trying to all these people that are wondering, are the hospitals going to have the equipment that they need? That was the question I was asking.
And in Jonathan's book, again, front row at the Trump show, it takes us even before there was candidate Trump, but throughout the experience. And I ask you this next question because we struggle with it too. And as the chief White House correspondent, who better to ask? But what is the debate in ABC when, and again, you put front and center in the book a lot of these questions, but do it from the perspective, you have a mother who's in her 80s in Florida. If the president in the briefing says something totally counter to what the CDC is saying, or totally counter to what every medical expert is saying about what people should or shouldn't do in terms of self-quarantining, we're broadcasting dangerous potential information that could cost lives. Where is that line between creating a platform where you're going to put out false propaganda, but yet he is the president of the United States here speaking to a nation?
Well, so I would say that there are two things. One, in terms of our responsibility to go and cover these briefings as reporters. This is different than the question of a network carrying it live. But as a reporter, some people have said, why do you even go? He says things that aren't true. He insults you. Why don't you just say, forget it, I'm not covering it? Well, no. This is the President of the United States. He has got his coronavirus task force. These are the people, the government's top experts, and these are the people leading the federal aspect of the effort to fight this virus. It is absolutely our responsibility to cover it, to ask questions, to learn from it, to correct misstatements when there are misstatements. The other question is a more difficult one, is should networks broadcast all of this unfiltered and live? And that's a tougher question. It is the President of the United States, and people do want to know what he's going to be saying as he is saying it. But I think there is a legitimate question, that fortunately is above my pay grade. I mean, my question is covering, the White House itself. But I think there is a legitimate question about whether or not to carry this stuff live. You mentioned my mom. I mean, my mom I've convinced to basically to stay home. I'm sending her everything that she'll need. She's, just stay home, Mom, stay home. She didn't vote when Florida had its primary, and she was really, I told her, don't go and vote. And she was very upset about that because she said she hadn't missed an election for 62 years. But, when Donald Trump came out and said the bit about, everybody going back for Easter, it wasn't directly that she said Trump said that, therefore, but she said to me, do you think I can start going out now? Can I go to the store? Can I go out and... No, Mom, no. So it is potentially dangerous. But, I think there's another important point, and I wrote this book because I had witnessed the kind of history that I don't think any other White House reporter had witnessed, because Donald Trump is unlike any president we've ever had. And I came in having met the guy 26 years ago and knowing him in a way that, certainly longer than any other reporter. And I had witnessed things, especially over the past 5 years in the campaign and in the White House, that just kind of blew my mind, and that I couldn't incorporate every day as I'm, covering breaking news. And then I went back and learned more about what was going on during the big moments of the first 3 years of the Trump presidency. And you learn there are things about him that are completely outrageous. There are things about him that can actually be incredibly constructive in a way that some of his predecessors weren't. And it's been just an absolutely fascinating story, and I wanted to get this stuff out there so you could better understand Donald Trump. And then this hits, and I see all of the things that I had witnessed kind of come into vivid color with how he's handled this crisis.
There's so much I want to get into. I'd love to ask the Rick Riley story, which it killed me if you know from SI and Rick Riley. But they tell me I got time for one more, and that is Maggie Haberman from the Times, who I think people would be hard-pressed to say there's many better reporters than her. President went after her as well, and called her fake news and all the other usual things because she used sources, which let's not go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, he said, or she responded saying, he doesn't want people to believe real-time accounts that they are seeing going on. The president is doing very little other than watching media coverage right now. My point is, it may be too early to write this, Jonathan, but is the danger long term that we're already in that moment where the people need to believe in that there's one set of facts, and the legacy from these last 3+ years, and who knows if it'll be 8 years or 4, is when we as a people need to believe and trust as fact, that's almost a bygone thing. It depends on which siloed place you get your information from. Isn't that the real dangerous legacy here?
It sounds like you have already read my books. I wrote the book to tell the story, to give people the impression of what this has been like, with the hope that whether you love Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump, that you would find this book, first of all, a great read, and you would learn something new about him. In the conclusion, though, I come to exactly that theme. And what I am really fearful about for our country is we have come to a place, and Donald Trump didn't invent this, but we have come to a place where roughly half the country won't believe what they hear coming out of the federal government, out of the White House, because Donald Trump has done so much to undermine that credibility by saying things that are not true. And that the other half of the country, or roughly, won't believe anything that they read or in a newspaper or see in a television news story, because the president and his supporters have done so much to call real stories, real news, fake news, and to undermine faith in real journalism. And you have a situation where nobody can agree on what the facts are. And if you can't agree on what the facts are, you have no hope of overcoming your divisions. We all have different opinions, reporters too, by the way. We all do. But that's the discussion. That's where the discussion should be, not whether or not night is day. I mean, and that's where we are. And you have people dealing from entirely different information streams and different sets of facts, and it's really troubling, really troubling.
Well, the book is front row at the Trump show, and not just if you're me, you love this stuff and the inside accounts here, but I think it's a snapshot of where we are today, and as you just heard from Jonathan, the potential consequences even when this pandemic is done. Jonathan, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Richard, thank you. Great to talk to you.